Hello, Phoenix here, doing the intro this time. It's been 6 weeks already of the Absolute Prose highlights, and it's finally, this is the 6th week. It's finally my turn to put one out. So if you're just jumping on, or if you've been following along, whatever the case may be, basically, we've had a lot on for the past couple months, both with the audiobook coming to fruition, which is coming out when I'm recording this. It's coming out in just 3 days, which is very exciting. You've maybe have seen a bit of stuff going up on socials, and even though I've been involved in the whole process, when I see those things go out, I get really pumped. But anyway, with that, as well as holidays and all that, I know for me personally, work has been crazy. So with all of that coming up, we've just needed to take a little bit of a step back, also to allow us space to do those things, as well as to explore some other new areas we might want to be taking the podcast and things we might want to be playing around with here. So to give ourselves this extra bit of time, we've been doing these Absolute Prose highlights basically every other week, putting out one of our favorite episodes. Each member of each Precipite, as we call ourselves, has selected their favorite episode to put forward for new listeners to jump in with, or for returning listeners to enjoy again. So without further ado, I have chosen the episode on imposter syndrome. I know for me personally, it was a really nice episode to be able to sit down with authors that have known me for a while, as well as a public forum on a podcast, and be able to fully disclose areas where I doubt myself or feel a little bit strange, because that's really a lot of the reason why, that's why we call this podcast Pros and Cons. It's fun wordplay, but it's real as well. There are days where I feel like I'm just a master of my craft and I really feel good about what I'm doing. And then there are days where I look around and I just kind of question, what am I doing here? And it's normal. It happens to all of us, no matter what we do. And that's what writing groups, as well as groups, are good for. And this podcast, if not anything, is an extension of the writers group that we all joined so many years ago, maybe 2 or 3 years ago, something like that. It's basically an extension of our writing group. And we get on to record these episodes. And yeah, we share craft, we learn from each other, but we also share our experiences and our struggles and our wins with each other and with anyone who might be listening. I know for me, that's something very valuable. And yeah, so if you listening have ever experienced imposter syndrome, be you a writer or creative of some other kind, or maybe in some other field, I hope you enjoy this episode and can find some solace in our shared experience of imposter syndrome. Like I said, this podcast is a bit of an extension of a writer's group. So if you are a writer out there and have some questions, or want to share your thoughts, or want to share your experience with imposter syndrome, whatever it might be, consider yourself an extension of this writer's group. Write to us. You can send us a message on our website, precipicefiction.com. You can contact us there. You can reach out on social media. We will get back to you. We will talk to you. And if you also have something you'd want us to talk about on this podcast, I'm sure we'd be happy to do it. So yeah, get in touch. And we can be your virtual writers group as well. Some other hot recommendations really quick, because this has already gone on a little bit long, but one of my favorite episodes as well is the food and literature episode. I hosted it a while back. It is an old episode, so the audio is a little bit so-so, but it was just an episode where I had a lot of fun, and it's one of my favorites. I think of it very fondly. As well as the genre deep dive into horror that James hosted a while back, which is just an excellent, if you're starting out in horror, or if you just need to get more tools in your toolbox. He breaks down some structural tools and like tools of the horror trade that I, not being a horror writer or not considering myself a horror writer, just tools that I had not considered. I didn't know were on the table at all, and they just made so much sense. So excellent crash course, hour listen, maybe a little bit over an hour. I can't quite remember, but you'll have quite a good foundation for jumping into horror if that's something you feel like doing. With that all being said, I'm going to get off of here and leave you to the episode right now. I hope you enjoy, and yeah, have a good one.
Welcome to Prose and Cons, a podcast by writers for writers, brought to you by Precipice Fiction. Precipice Fiction would like to acknowledge the people of the Eora and Durag nations as the original custodians and storytellers of the land this podcast was created on.
Welcome to the Prose and Cons podcast, a podcast by emerging writers for emerging writers, because sometimes we feel like prose and many other times we feel like cons. My name is Matan Elul and I am your host for today, and we've got an excellent group as always. I'll let you boys introduce yourself this time.
Hi, I'm Paddy Boylan. I am a bid writer, creative writing teacher, and editor. And sometimes I even find the time to write fiction.
Yeah. On occasion, yeah. Phoenix.
Hey, I'm Phoenix. I'm a freelance editor, founder of Bentlight Writing, and an agented children's book writer. And I also find time to write sometimes.
James.
Hi, I'm James Healy. I'm a freelance editor and writer of horror stories and science fiction. I'm known for cooling engines, and now and again I have been known to find time to write. It's been a while, but it has been fabled that I do some writing.
Oh wow, I can feel it. This is going to be like an AA meeting. I can already feel it.
This is feeling very topic appropriate.
Yeah, okay. Listeners,
Just
you've seen the
speaking of topic really quick, I just want to get something off my chest. It feels weird to say I'm an agented children's book writer, even though it's like kind of a big deal. It's the weirdest thing to say. It's like, what does
Phoenix,
that mean?
you are. It's true.
It's true.
Are you apologizing or are you like...
I'm not apologizing. It just feels weird. I don't know. It's like, so what, you have an agent, but you haven't sold the book yet? It's like, yeah, that's exactly what it means. Or it's like, so how many books are agented? Do you have an agent? Like, what does that mean?
Yeah, this is very on topic. Listeners, if you've read the title, you know that what we're going to discuss. We're going to discuss imposter syndrome. But before we get into the fun stuff, Phoenix, what have you been reading?
So nearly through to, I had a flight out to London this last weekend, and I was reading Frankenstein along the way. So I'm very close to the end of that one. It's getting very, very good. And the other thing is I just watched, I really like watching and / listening to people play Dungeons and Dragons. I have a really great time doing that. So I was listening to Questing Queens by Dimension 20. It's 4 very famous drag queens playing Dungeons and Dragons. It was very delightful.
Wow. There's a lot of Let's Plays at the moment. Like, it is getting saturated.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I'm okay with it.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
James, what about you?
I just finished Children of Men, which I really enjoyed. Interesting, I guess, structurally, because I felt like it changed a couple of times. You know, when you get to the end of a story and you're like, this feels almost unrecognizable in terms of what's going on chapter to chapter. But I really, really enjoyed it. Very bleak, quite exciting towards the end. I found myself like really riveted to like every paragraph. I was like, what's going to happen next? So that's always a good sign. It just really feel invested in the characters by the end. So I really, really enjoyed that. I'm looking forward to watching the film again now, because they're so different, but they strangely managed to pull off a lot of the same feelings throughout each of the stories, even though they're completely different plot lines. So yeah, I truly recommend anyone who enjoyed the film to check out the book.
Nice. Paddy?
Still reading Robert Harris's Imperium, which is about the fall of the Roman Republic. Although I have been, so I've talked about that a few times already in different apps. I've been watching The Wire after so many people have recommended it. Yeah, James, smiling and nodding for those who are watching the video. Oh, damn. The writing in this show is impeccable. It's so good. I don't know what to say about it other than just it's so good and just fawning over it. So just watch it. Go watch it if you haven't already. Consider subtitles though. Being a dummy, I found some of the inner city dialects very hard to understand, so I had to subtitle it to make sense of a lot of it. It's getting easier, but yeah, closed captions.
Yeah, it is amazing, but it is like listening to like a different language.
Sometimes
everything that writer does feels that way. He also wrote Generation Kill, which was following soldiers during the invasion of Iraq, and because they speak with so much jargon, military lingo, and there's a bunch of other things, you do just feel like I bought the DVD, and the DVD came with a booklet that translated all the terms. Explained all them.
Whoa.
It was very authentic, though.
Yeah, absolutely. Very authentic.
Nice. Just on a 5-second tangent, I gotta say, I feel like nothing is watchable without closed captions nowadays. Like audio editing is just awful, especially in the cinema. I feel like with soundtracks, beautiful soundtracks, just blasting at full force, and then characters whispering, it's just a notorious one, by the way, is Lord of the Rings.
I was
Okay.
just gonna say Lord of the Rings.
Yeah.
Really?
It's notoriously impossible unless this is your 15th time watching, which is it would be for me, and I know the lines by heart. It's just impossible to understand what they're saying. As far as reading, I'm still going through Hilary Mantel's The Body and the Light. No further comment. I did
The
watch
Mirror and the Light. The Mirror and the Light.
Oh, sorry. The Bring Up the Bodies is the second
Good
one.
enough.
Yeah. Thanks, buddy.
But you get to keep reading it though, right? Like all the rest of us just have to live with it in our past and just be haunted by it for the rest of our days. Oh no, I wish I could forget that novel and reread it so much. So much.
How long until they have memory erasing pills for us?
Not long enough.
I did watch Bullet Train. Has anyone watched that one?
No,
Watched
but it looks
half of
fun.
it, I think.
Is that a good sign, James, that you watched half of it? Or
I guess not really. I had time to watch some of it, and then I left, and then I could have come back and watched the rest of it, but I went back to probably something else. Probably Chimp Empire, which I've been watching.
Hard-hitting drama on Chimp Empire.
Okay, to our topic.
Oh no, give your. What did you think of Bullet Train?
I mean, it was okay. It was fun. It was fun, but it was not like you're not impressed with it too much while you're watching. Like, oh, this is cool. This is nice. Good stuff. But you're not like, wow.
Yeah, it was fun. I do enjoy films that they kind of everyone's got the same motive, and they just keep introducing characters that are chasing after the same thing. So you start to feel, oh, this is going to get really complicated. But I never got that sense from that film. It just kept adding things in. But I was kind of like, well, it's obviously just going to come down to these 2 or 3 characters. Each of the other characters are sort of expendable.
All right, listeners, let's get back to what we're here to discuss, which I suspect might be a bit uncomfortable for some of us. Today, I'd like to talk to you about a topic that is a little closer to the heart. Let's be honest, there's a good chance that you are writers, and being writers, a new writer, an experienced writer, it's not always easy. Many of us go through long periods in which our novels either collect dust or sit at the top of a slush pile at some literary agent's or publisher's table. Some of us are agented, just waiting to see what's the next step. Maybe you've never even sold a story. Maybe the book you're working on or have been working on for years has become a big, unfinished monster that you're just afraid to look at this point. Maybe you're even asking yourself, and that's something I've been coping with for a while, am I really a writer? And if so, who gets to decide? Is it enough that I see myself as a writer? Is there a hidden criteria, a committee? Is there a number of sales or a number of readers? Maybe others have even praised your writers. Maybe you have a good support group. Maybe they tell you it's great. But maybe there's a voice inside you that says that they say that just because they like you, right? Or maybe they like your writing, your friends, your family, even your fellow writers. But they don't like it. Like, would they pay for it? Maybe some of you have even sold your book, or even think to yourself that even if I do sell my book, at some point, the people who read it are going to look up and they're going to realize that my writing is crap. And just because I have a publishing contract doesn't really make me a good writer. Now, if you have been having these thoughts, you're not alone. I'd go as far as to wager that many writers, I might even say most writers, have had these kind of feelings, at least to an extent. So again, welcome to the Pros and Cons podcast. And today we're going to talk about imposter syndrome and other personal setbacks. With that out of the way, I'd love to hear from you guys. What is the imposter syndrome? Have you personally dealt with it? And I'd love to hear some even personal definitions of this term.
I'd love to give a definition, mostly because I crash looked at the Wikipedia page 10 minutes before the episode. And it's common enough for everyone. I'd be surprised if many listeners out there hadn't heard of it. But for those who haven't, it's the overwhelming sense, despite all evidence to the contrary, that your work is no good, you are not really as good as people think you are, And I keep seeing this online. Sooner or later, people will find out, which sounds kind of a tragic place to be. And it doesn't matter how. There's this condition called body dysmorphia, where sometimes people think they're really fat, or they think they've got, like, they're really ugly. And it doesn't matter what people tell them. What the reality is, they just can't accept that these ideas they've got about themselves aren't true. And I think imposter syndrome is very akin to that.
As you read that definition, my mind went to body dysmorphia, and I'd never made that association
right.
before, but literally just now I was like, oh man, it's like, well, like exactly the same.
Yeah, it's almost like talent dysmorphia.
Yeah, like credibility dysmorphia almost.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
Did you guys ever deal with this? Did you ever wake up in the morning and feel like, I know Matan said my writing is great, but is it?
yeah, heaps. Actually, like before I was a writer, I was a software developer, and I felt imposter syndrome almost every single day at my job. Even though there were some things that I would be proud of at times, I think it came from when I was in university. I just always felt like everyone else was better at it than I was, or everyone else loved it a little bit more than I did, or something. And I knew I wasn't outstanding at it. I wasn't like some note, like someone to note in the field. But and even though I got the job I did the things I did, it was still like it wasn't enough. I never knew enough. I never felt comfortable enough in my skin in that job, and it was very stressful, very draining.
It's interesting that you felt it even outside of your writer's career.
Mm-hmm.
Does it feel different, Phoenix, the feelings that you have as a writer than the ones you had as a software engineer or in other fields of your life?
It does. I do still get imposter syndrome as a writer, definitely, 100%. But it is less, and I think that comes down to like, I think early encouragement is so important because it's almost like when you're starting over trying something new in your life. It's almost like we hit the reset button on like childhood trauma or something, because it's like this is the childhood phase of this career, or this childhood phase of this thing we're starting. And if the praise is like feels genuine and good in that moment, then those core memories that we have with that thing are almost more solid. Because like when I was just starting, I don't know, I did have some moments of people giving me good feedback who were not like people that I knew intimately, and were people that had no real motives to. It was feedback I could kind of believe, and it made me feel like, oh, okay, I do feel good at this. As well as I did have some, I was interested in what I was writing, and I think that helped me believe in what I was writing, because I was like, I don't know what no matter what people say, if they don't like, yeah, maybe the writing skill wasn't as good, but I genuinely liked it, and I was like, this is interesting to me.
Yeah, I think that is a good thing, as long as you have something that you're coming back to, and then that's kind of like your foundation. Like that's a really good solid place to look at it from.
Yeah.
When I first started doing writing classes, I would have been about 18, 19, and there was a 10-year gap between me and the next youngest person in the class. So everyone was sort of in their late 20s and their 30s. And I remember looking at the stuff that they were writing and thinking, oh, this is so much more substantial than what I'm writing. Their writing is so good. The emotions that they're dealing with are so good. The stories they're trying to tell, because everyone was actually trying to write a novel at the time. And I remember thinking that the stuff that they were writing, I was like, wow, that's going to be a book someday. Whereas what I'm writing is just this silly little science fiction something or other that I just remember thinking was nowhere near the same caliber. I think that what I was reading in a lot of them, because we would have spent a few years writing together, I think that their stories were, because I got to know them personally, I think that there was a lot of emotion coming forwards in their stories, possibly unintentionally, because a lot of the stories you could see elements of like who they were. Whereas at that time, I didn't think I was writing the same thing. But years later, I looked back on that and I realized, oh, there was a lot of personal expression going on there, but kind of like layered or kind of behind all of the science fiction-y stuff. So they may have looked at my story and said, oh, it's a lot of the same. There's emotion there that he's telling a certain way, if you know what I mean.
Looking back at your own stuff is
Yeah.
such a good confidence booster. Well, I mean, at least when I speak to you guys, it seems to be like often we think like, it wasn't that good, and maybe that's why we put down writing for a while. We look back on stuff we did a decade ago, think like, oh wow, that's actually pretty good. Oh, that's much better than I thought it was.
Yeah.
This advice would backfire if you look back on your stuff and you think like, oh, wow, that's worse than I thought it was. But I mean, even that's showing that your taste evolves, right?
I think that it's like your craft evolves, but like the core of what you were doing may have been very, very strong. It's just you may not have had the best tools for doing it. That's what I find. I find like the writing isn't very good, but what I was trying to create, I'm like, oh, that's still worth creating. Now I'm better, and I would have a better understanding of how to do that.
Yeah, I agree with Patty though that sometimes, and James too, that sometimes you go back and you discover that no, you were not a complete pile of horseshit. You have improved, but the talent was there. Elaborating on this question, guys, I want to share one of my personal problems. I've been writing since I was 4 years old, but for the most part, I've been writing for my mom. My mom would be my main audience. I would write stories, give it to my mom. But the first novel I ever wrote, I was pretty young. My mom would come to my room every Friday, read a chapter, tell me how incredible it was. And I think while my mom has been extremely supportive and she probably nourished my desire to be a writer, it did create this other thing in me, this fear of showing it to anyone else, this fear of, okay, mom loves me, but what about other people? And gently I started to show it to my brother, to some very, very, very close friends. Like most of my friends I did not show to. And when I moved to Australia, for those of you who were there or didn't know me back then, I was 22. I finished my military service. I moved to Australia. And one of the changes I've made in my life is that I've decided to become serious about writing, to the point that every day I would get up and write. The thing is, I never told anyone. I didn't tell the people I work with. I didn't even tell my flatmates. They would just know that I'm in my room. I would tell them it is school stuff. They would see me typing, and I would tell them I'm doing homework. Even my wife, when we started dating, I didn't tell her I'm a writer. To this day, I remember the day she walked into my room and asked me about the pile of papers on the shelf. And because every week we'd go to the writing group and I would print out 10 pages. And I just remember looking at her and thinking, okay, time to say it. And I did. And her reaction was, I think she was more surprised at the fact that I didn't talk about it than the fact that I did it. And you would think that from that moment I would start telling everyone, but no, I didn't tell most people. I remember every Thursday night I had the writing group, and I would need to take a night off because I was a bartender, and the writing group was a night. So I would tell the boss I need Thursday off, but I wouldn't say why. I just said it's something personal. And then one day I just told him, after years of working for the guy, like, I don't know why, I just told, I actually go to writing groups. And I expected him to laugh or to ask me how many books I've sold, which, hint, hint, 0. And he didn't. And it was a good talk. I remember talking to him for an hour. But I do remember that fear of not sharing. And I wanted to know if you, obviously we're doing a podcast very publicly, a writer's podcast. but how open are you about being a writer? And has it been a journey, or have you been like that from the start?
I was always very open about it. I think because when I started writing, I didn't really understand what it was, and I was just trying to discuss it with people to be like, "Oh, this is how I've been spending my time." I guess I was looking for other people that were possibly doing the same thing. I think it's probably backfired on me a little bit because I've been doing it for so long. I'd be quite embarrassed now talking to my friends who knew me as in my teens and kind of early 20s because I've been saying I enjoy writing. I'd like to be a writer for so long, and then I'm still kind of still very much in the same place as I was back then. I also noticed that if I'm telling someone about a story I'm working on, because I'm really excited about a story, and I'm telling someone I'm writing about this, and I'm saying this and this and this, people were often like, "Oh, that sounds really interesting. That sounds really clever." And I would always get like a nice little feeling of, "Well, it does sound clever, doesn't it?" Yeah. But then I mightn't finish the story, and I feel like, oh, I got a little bit of credit for basically having said I was writing it, or for just coming up with the idea, rather than getting any kind of like, oh, this is a well told story that you actually finished.
Yeah.
So I really feel uncomfortable. I'm always trying to not talk about something until I'm a good bit into having written it, that I know I'm going to finish it. because I don't like feeling like I'm getting the instant gratification of just having come up with a story that I haven't finished yet. But yeah, I think I've always spoke about it, but now I think I'd be more reserved about speaking about it because I've been speaking about it for so long, basically.
But James, just say you write for fun. I mean, you do write for fun. Like that's the reality. You just say like, it's just something I do for fun. And then
Patty,
whatever like aspirations you have to sell 1 million books, like keep that to the side till it happens. But that's also happens to be true in your case.
But is he writing for fun though?
James, you write for fun, right? You've told us before that you love this shit.
I mean, like
I was
writing.
saying,
I mean, writing is fun, but I don't think you are writing for fun. If I'm making sense, you're writing so people would read it.
I think the way that I'd see it is like I was saying to Phoenix about like having a foundation that you come back to. My foundation is that I know I'll always write. It's just a process that I engage in, that I'll always engage in. It's how I process my thoughts. It's how I express myself. It's how I am most interested in spending my free time. So it's something that I would just always do, even if there was never any chance of it. Even if there was never any chance of it being sold, or if there was never any chance of other people reading it, I still think it's something that I would do as a process and as a practice. I think it was just on me to say I'm as well to look into the craft of doing this well, so that I'm at least not just writing pages and pages of like stream of consciousness, try to formulate it into a story or something like that. And then the next thing on from that was, wouldn't it be great if you could, someday make a living doing this, so that you would just have more time to do this.
Yeah.
So that is the idea. That is what I come back to. So yes, it is fun.
Phoenix, Patty, what about you two? Patty, like, do you tell people that you write? Like, you tell people close to you? How much you talk about it?
I tell everyone. I'm absolutely fine with it. I don't really have. Maybe everyone has a little bit of imposter syndrome. Maybe some people don't. I have very little imposter syndrome. I'm totally fine with telling people. What I don't do is show people my writing until I know it's finished. I really, really don't want anyone to read my stuff until I know, like, yeah, this is good. Because I don't want people to think that I'm bad at it. Like, if I show them a first draft and it's not developed, I don't want people to be thinking, like, secretly, this guy sucks. Look at these sentences. They're terrible. My girlfriend's a designer, and she has the same thing in the designs. Like, she works in an open plan office, and she's really good at what she does. But she hates anyone looking over her shoulder and seeing a design that's not done. Because, like, hey, you're not seeing the real thing. Yeah, that's I was going to say issue. It's not even really an issue. Like, who wants to read? It's a battle getting people to read your half-finished stuff. Like, that's why beta readers are hard to find.
No, I completely understand. I think you have a different species of the syndrome. You have like a pre-imposter syndrome. You don't want to go there.
Yeah, I get an opposite thing going, but I'll talk about that later.
Phoenix?
More and more as I've written, I've come to appreciate that it's like, yeah, obviously we want to have these things a bit more polished before we show things, because I've started to think of it really as like, it's like how like someone who's really good at drawing, when they draw, they have that first little sketch where they're just getting the frame down. Like, that's what a lot of early stuff is. Like, we're just getting frames down, and then we have to go through and actually like flush it out. But until you do that, it's like, I mean, yeah, you're just looking at frames. Like, it's not really, this isn't the story really.
Those early sketches always look so cool though. Like those kind of rough sketches.
It's nice.
Really good. It is nice.
My next question was going to be, did you ever question an achievement of yours or feel like a fraud? But it's pretty close to what I just asked. So I'll just condense it. You guys have had achievements in writing, in life in general. Patty, you got a massive job based on your writing skills. Phoenix, James, did you ever look at it and think like, that must be a mistake? Clearly, they must have chosen me because they had one slot and no one else to give it to, right?
I felt this specifically with when I started editing, when people started paying me to look at their work. Every now and then I'd have this feeling of like, who am I to, well, actually, like a little bit of that, a little bit of like, who am I to edit their work and tell them what they need to do, because I haven't even sold a book yet. And that's the main like gauge for me. Like, I haven't done this. But at the same time, and then there was another level to it where sometimes I would think like, no, I'm actually very good at this. But if anyone asked me what my achievements were, I never felt like I would have enough achievement to give them that would show them that confidence. And I feel like I would turn people away, predominantly because like I do have an agent. And in a way that's almost, I was just thinking like, in a way that's almost like selling a book, because I have someone who's literally spending their time when they could be doing other things, dedicating it to my manuscript and stuff, which is cool. But I had imposter syndrome even with that, because it's like, oh, it's only for one of my manuscripts. It's not like I have an agent for my whole body of work. It's like, no, they represent one manuscript that hasn't sold. So it's like that feeling of, it sounds glorious, but I feel like I'm good at making it. I have the fear that I'm good at making it sound like a bigger deal than it is. In reality, it is a big deal, but
it's an
like,
enormous deal.
It is.
It's a freaking huge deal. It's amazing that you have an agent.
But that's
guys.
that's the thing.
True.
Phoenix doesn't even mention. Check out how humble he is. He doesn't even mention in his introduction that his story has been nominated for the Aurealis Award, which is a very, very
Mhm.
big deal. He was top 6 out of a pool of hundreds.
Mm-hmm.
You won't even hear him talk about it. Even now, he's scared in the subject. Phoenix, how did you feel when Ali sent us that message in the group chat? Were you like, must be a mistake or what? Well, how did you feel?
Okay, so my first feeling is also, this is getting way more therapeutic than I thought it would. I'm like, whoa, this is touching on some stuff. No, my thought was like, what is this award? Why am I nominated for it? Because it's like, it must not be that big of a deal. Like, how big of a deal is this award really? And then I was reading into it. I'm like, oh, it is actually kind of a big deal award. But even still, I'm like, but how big is Aurealis? Like, how big are they? Like, because I don't really know. And up until, I don't know, for a while, I still kind of doubted.
We'll also point out here that Matan is also nominated for an Aurealis Award. So talking about humble pie, like Matan, come on, man.
Yeah, but this was the Phoenix segment of the thing. So yeah. All right. If no one's got something to add, I'll go to the next question.
I would just add on, just before we jump, not so much with writing, but definitely with whenever I've done like competitions and stuff.
James, what kind of competitions are you in?
I do kickboxing and Muay Thai. So I would do fights or tournaments. And as soon as I won a fight, I just tell myself, oh, that was because they made a mistake, or that was because they're younger than me, so they're less experienced, or they're a little bit older than me, so it's harder for them to train. Or, oh, I just trained more for that fight. Like, as soon as I've won, I'm like immediately taking away from what it was.
Really?
Wow.
100%, yeah.
You never went like, you're pathetic, you're weak, I pity you. Like, you never look down on them. Like, how dare you challenge me, you fool? No,
that's right.
No, because if I did that, then I'd be like, well, I shouldn't have fought that guy in the first place. Then it was set up. I would tell myself that it was set up then, but I would win. They would lose. And then before the fight, I have the opposite, where I'm thinking, I only got in here because they were short on numbers, or the coach only threw me in here because he needs someone to fight the other guy. And I always have a little wobble like 2 or 3 weeks before the fight where I'm like, I literally can't do this. Why did I sign on for this? Who do I think I am? And I think that that's all part of the process of like training and like trying to get better at it, because that little wobble, that lack of confidence makes me really dig down and try really, really hard for a couple of weeks before the fight to change up my tactics, to change up my training and what I'm doing. And then never to coast on the success of the fight to make me think, I've got this, like I'm actually good at this. The fact that I always think, oh, I got lucky, I skated by, I need to really, really train for the next one. And I think having that same thought process carry over into writing is something that's probably good, probably makes me more critical of my own work, and probably something that maybe I don't enjoy any positive feedback, but it makes me take the critical feedback really seriously and always come back again and again and try to work harder at what I do. So I don't know if that's a entirely healthy attitude to have, but it's definitely an attitude that I think I'd probably rather have that than not have that, than coast on.
No, that does sound like textbook imposter syndrome.
Yeah. Not letting yourself feel your wins, even like fully feel them, starting to discredit them immediately after they happen. I mean, that's what I was just like what we just mentioned with the award. I did the same thing, and it's wild.
Yeah.
And then hearing you say it, it's like, oh my gosh, I know that feeling. And it's just such like, to hear someone else say it, it's just such a wild thing that we do, like immediately discrediting a win.
Did you guys ever read something so good that it made you put down the book and think, what the hell am I doing? I'm never going to write
Oh.
like this.
No, well, not exactly the opposite, but you're reading The Mirror and the Light. Hilary Mantel's whole trilogy, I would regularly put the book down, stare into space, and think, I really want to write right now. It's never had the effect of making me think I'll never write like this. It's always made me think I want to write like she does. And again, I guess that's because I don't have imposter syndrome. But no, and the idea that you would put it down and think like I will never write like this, that to me is like, it's so. I mean, Matan, have you felt like that? Because that's terrible. Now, if you have.
So I'll tell you what. When I'm reading like published books, it used to happen in the beginning. Like I would read not even Tolkien. I would just read like a decent fantasy book and think like, can I do this? And that kind of went away as I got better. But something that did persist is that I would read something written by peers, like by friends who are writers, like you guys, or even in the writing group back in Sydney. I vividly remember that feeling in the writers group in Sydney. I would sit and someone would read something. Do you guys know Helen Line? You guys all know Helen.
Yeah,
right?
of course.
Yeah, Helen. I've got her book.
Yeah, me too.
So Helen, for example, hi Helen, if you ever listen to this, Helen would read something and it would be so polished and so good. And like in very anime fashion, I would go into a monologue in my head, like I could never. What the gap between us is what am I doing here? And
I can't
would
even
always
see her reading. She's moving too fast.
The punctuation is beyond me. Specifically, I would feel that about vocabulary. You guys all know by now, English is my second language, and every word I would pick would feel bad to me, and every word someone else's picks feels perfect to me. Not everyone, but the good writers. And that's something I would feel like, why can't I come up with, like, it would be the silliest thing. Like someone would write, she was sitting on the veranda, and I'm like, I would have written balcony, I suck, you know. that kind of stuff.
I actually feel that with Patty sometimes, because I admire your vocabulary, Patty.
He's so good.
Yeah, so like you'll say words sometimes, I'm like, that was a good word,
Really?
you said. Yeah,
I don't consider myself as having a good vocabulary. I admire Alex's vocabulary. That kid's vocabulary is off the chain.
Oh no, this is escalating. Well,
maybe
now
if we ask Alex,
my
we'll do a full
vocabulary.
circle.
I like James's vocabulary.
Nah, Alex would say like, yeah, I know.
Right on. Right on.
He's comfortable with his ability. I think. I don't know. Actually, maybe he's not.
Well, Alex is terrific.
Mm-hmm.
All right. How do you guys help each other, us friends, when you recognize that a friend is having a bit of a moment with their writing? What do you say? What do you do?
Depends on what their writing is like. Because it doesn't, I mean, you never want to put someone's writing down, but being very honest, if there's someone whose writing you just don't think is actually that good, then you don't want to be giving them, like, putting on praise that is undeserving, because that's not kind, right? I mean, you don't want to say it's terrible, but give them appropriate praise. Like, like, I see there's potential here, keep at it. You'll get to where you want to be. But if someone's writing is genuinely good, then like, what are you talking about? Like, stop it. You're great. Like, you look them in the eye and say genuinely, like, this is really good. And you give them a little bit of negative criticism, constructive criticism as well, so they know that you're not just putting it on. You mix that in, and yeah.
I think that part is important, because I think we tend to block out something that is just like fluff, you know what I mean? Like, you're the best, you can do it, I've read your stuff, you're going to be a bestseller, you're going to get the contract. I think that at some point we kind of lose the, he's in my corner, but he's maybe too much in my corner.
That could feel worse sometimes than the opposite.
Yeah. I found that I've never had to like talk to, I feel like this is the first time I'm actually properly talking to friends about writing imposter syndrome and stuff right now. But what I do know is that if I come across like a client whose writing is very, very rough, there have been times where it's like, all right, I got to get serious, because honestly, the thing that's gonna help this writing is not gonna be to say like, all right, you're ready for line editing now because I did a dev edit. I'm like, no, I did a dev edit, but while doing the dev edit, like there are some very, very fundamental things that are even beyond a developmental edit. Like this needs some things.
Yes.
So like I have had a client like that, and it became really cool, and it kind of bridged into an area that I guess I'd consider more like manuscript coaching or something, where I did make some special packages for this person to kind of like I did a dev edit and I gave some very high level stuff, and then they came back and wanted more, and I was like, all right, well, to be very honest, like this is what I would recommend you do. Like send the manuscript back to me. I'm going to read it. I'm going to give you some very high level stuff, and we're going to like make a plan for what this needs to do, but we have to have a roadmap for this because there's quite a lot here. And it's just like, I guess what I'm getting at is it's like not advice for imposter syndrome, but I guess it's avoiding the creation of imposter syndrome, because it's not like I'm like, hey, you're a bad writer, you shouldn't do this. It's like, hey, this needs work. Like you have an idea here. I'm going to help you get that idea across. Like this is kind of what we need to do. I see what you're doing, but in order for a reader to understand this, we just need to change it, and we need to help. Like that's what the tools are for, to help get ideas through and communicate them. So it's not like you're a bad writer, you shouldn't write, and then it builds that seed of like, you know, imposter syndrome, whatever. I'm a bad writer, I shouldn't write. Instead, it's like, yeah, they didn't have the tools available, and that's what an editor's for. That's what that's what the job is.
Yeah,
Phoenix, I just want to echo what you said because I really like it. Basically, you're not dealing in absolutes, like I said. You're not telling them you're good, you're bad. You're just getting into the mud with them. And you're saying, let's have a look together. In your case, you were very familiar with the material, but even if you aren't, like, why do you think you're a bad writer? Let's read it. Let's read it and see. And then going back to what Patty said, you give honest criticism, feedback sandwich. We discussed this many times.
Yeah.
Like, here's the good, here's the bad, here's the foundations I think you should keep, and try to pull them out of this. I think that's practical, very practical.
Yeah, when it comes down to feedback, I always look at it like you're building something. If you're building a building, like you don't know what the building's going to look like when it's finished, when it's furnished, or what it's going to be used for. But we always know like how to structure something and how to build something together. So I'm always coming in and telling someone how to do that. Or you could do it this way and it's going to end up this way. You can do it that way, it's going to end up that way. And then it's kind of them to figure out what the end form of that is going to be, as long as you can just keep giving them structural stuff and giving them advice along those terms. I find it's almost more difficult if you're talking to someone who is extremely confident in what they're doing, whereas you're feeling like, oh, you know, there's certain issues here and there's certain issues there, and they're kind of not hearing it. They're like, no, I think that's good, and I think that's good. It's kind of like, okay,
I meant this.
Coming into a complicated area. I don't know how to proceed. I don't know how to give this person advice if they don't want to hear it.
Yeah.
In that moment, it's kind of a very quick relief for me, because it's like if I see that they're like, oh, well, this is great anyway, I'm like, oh, okay, well, then we're done here. Like, there's nothing.
That'd be $400.
There you go.
Yeah, the invoice is in the mail.
I've actually never, in terms, like, I've experienced that with like people I know. I've never really experienced that with a client. I found that clients are usually very like, sometimes I give like sheets of like, there's a lot here, like stuff like that. And they're all very like, thank you so much. Like, this was great. Like, blah, blah, blah. I'm like, wow, amazing. Like, they're all taking it great.
They paid for it. Like, if they didn't think you were an authority, they wouldn't. Once there's money on the table, of course, I got to be more invested.
I've only ever come across it with friends or people in writing groups as well. In writing groups, it's quite funny because I remember the facilitator was coming back to the person and giving this advice, and the person was just like, nah, I think it's pretty good. And the whole class is just like, okay. So
I'd love to know who this person is.
Nobody
wants
to discuss their writing afterwards.
I want to know who this is after the podcast.
We'll gossip.
No one in any writing group that we've been in.
Okay.
Hey, for Pros and Con Premium for extra gossip after this. Guys, last question, because we're running this long. Now let's step away from the imposter syndrome for a second. Not all setbacks have been imposter syndrome related. Some setbacks have been internal, some of them have been external. And when I mean setback is what got in the way of your writing, what caused a break, what decreased the volume of your writing, Or what just made you feel like the writing's just not coming out the way it used to? What kind of moments did you have?
Okay. Well, I'm going through one right now. I haven't written a word. No, it's true. I've written some. I haven't written anything substantial creatively for about maybe going on 12 months now. And I'm actually okay with that. And I'm supposed to be doing, well, I say supposed to be doing, I successfully applied for a mentorship not long ago. I, gave them a sample of my writing, and it was kind of a competition, kind of not. The board said, hey, we really like it. Here's the mentorship. Here's the mentor. And I've had to explain to my mentor, and she's cool with this. I actually need to take a step back from writing at the moment. My reason is I've moved to another country. Before I moved, I was basically unemployed, and I just really had to get my shit together. I really, really had to focus on making money and getting a career and getting a stable life here in New Zealand where I live. And actually, I've had a lot of people say, like, oh, maybe you should just find time to write here or there. Maybe you should. Phoenix, I know you write first thing in the morning, right?
I tried to less
Yeah.
recently.
I mean, that's still a good practice. But also people suggest stuff like that. And I've come to the conclusion that no, that doesn't work for me. I'm giving myself permission to step back, focus on other things, and not have writing as this thing that I'm finding little scraps of time to do here and there. I want to wait until I've got some solid time and I'm established and say, like, now I'm writing. And that way I know I can do it without finding 5 minutes between tasks, eking out time to write. Yeah, that's where I'm at. And I'm very comfortable with that. And I've got a plan for when I'm going to start again, actually. So yeah,
Right
I
on.
think it's yeah, well, thank you. I think it's okay sometimes to step back. And just because you're
It
not
is
writing
okay.
at the moment doesn't mean that you won't again in the future. And I know I will.
I just
Yeah,
love
well said.
the conviction of it because it's like I don't like doubt you for a second of anything. It's like, yeah, this is what you want to do. This is what you feel good about. This is what works for you. And it just comes to me, it comes across as like just this unshakable whatever. And like this is your relationship with writing. And I'm just like, badass.
Thanks.
Like go on. Keep on.
Thank you.
It's very encouraging.
Yeah.
At the moment, I haven't written in 4 months following a move as well. And it's just that my daily routine is quite full that I can't find the time. And then when I do get time in the evening, I'm so tired that I'm pretty much just like ready to go to bed. So it is encouraging that your attitude is like,
Yeah,
I will get back to it. So that's quite motivating to hear that.
you were in that space where you wrote a lot, so there's no reason why you won't be in that space again. Like it's not like the magic is gone. It's just the setup's got to be right.
Yeah, that's it.
I feel like I'm kind of avoiding writing a little bit right now. Well, one, this week and the next week are kind of busy, so I'm giving myself a little bit like whatever, maybe it won't happen. But like the last thing I wrote, like I'm working through some parts of my book that are kind of feeling a little bit stale, and because they're feeling a little bit stale, I'm kind of feeling unmotivated to go back to them because it's like it's not coming out quite right, and so it's not as motivating to get back. But kind of a tangent, but it's like kind of when I hit on a part that feels stale, it's also kind of exciting in a way because it's like, well, we'll see what happens because maybe this is myself telling myself that a change in the book is coming. There's a new path that's like I'll be exploring some new stuff.
I love that you find it exciting. I just love it. I think that's such a good attitude to have about this.
Yeah. Well, Matan, what about you? I mean, it seems like you're always writing, and it's impressive.
No.
Listeners, we keep a message group where the Precipice Fiction guys and gal all communicate regularly, and we post like how much we're writing. And Phoenix, you and Matan right now are keeping that torch burning. Like you guys write so much, so consistently. It's great.
I tell you what. So I just want to link this into something. When I came to Australia, I lived like a hermit. I used to wake up every day, go to Oliver Brown, for those of you who are from Australia, drink 2 cups of coffee, pump out 2,000 words, go to work as a bartender, finish around midnight, go to sleep. That was my life. Okay. At some point, I got a girlfriend. All right. I went to Oliver Brown half the days. The other half, I tried to do something with her. And then I got qualified as an English teacher. And suddenly, my work moved to the morning, which has always been my sweet spot for writing. But don't early morning, not like an early bird. I'm a 9 o'clock writer, if there is such a thing. And ever since, I've been a 9 o'clock English teacher, not a 9 o'clock writer. And I have tried to write at nights. and I found it hard. The more I find success in my professional life, like now I'm doing a lot of editing on the side, I'm teaching more, I'm going to university, I feel like what suffers is writing time. And I'm conflicted because it is nice to see more money coming in, and it is nice to feel achievement in other fields of life, like whether it is your relationships, your professional career. It is nice, but I always felt like it's a tug of war between writing time and other things. And maybe at some point in the near or far future, there are going to be kids. And then you ask yourself, okay, now even the nighttime, is that writing time? Maybe no. And that made me feel a certain way. And then I remember I read a book called Letters from Tolkien, where Tolkien explains why The Hobbit came out only when his kids were a little older. And it's not that Tolkien started writing at 37. It's that he finally found that sweet spot in life where he has established his career. His kids were old enough that he could just tell them to go listen to the radio or whatever and have some time for himself. And I yearn for that time to come. I still try to write. Like Patty mentioned, we have a chat group where we say things about how much we wrote. I remember saying around June that I want to finish my manuscript by July. And for a time, that felt very possible. I remember pumping out 1,000 words a day. And then stuff happened. Like we went to Supernova, which is an amazing place with our book. And we had to do all this work about posters and videos. And suddenly that took my time. And then it was exam season in the university. Okay. And then my editing jobs started to explode. And it's September tomorrow. And the book's not done. And I think the important part is not to be mad, not to be too disappointed. It's okay to hold yourself accountable, but that sweet spot will come. Just got to be ready for it.
Be proud of your flexibility, because it's like the great thing about goals and objectives I find is like I feel it's also knowing when to change them and when to shift them, because it does happen and they are just goals and they're things to focus on, things to drive you forward. But like if you're inflexible about when it needs to shift, like, I don't know, you could end up missing out on some really great stuff or whatever. So it's like the maturity of knowing like I'm going to move it and that's okay. And yeah, that's what it is.
Well said.
Nice. So thank you guys so much for doing this podcast and for sharing. I really enjoyed this conversation. Like Phoenix said, it did end up being more therapeutic than I expected it to be, but I did hope it will be. Really glad to hear it. Before we finish, as always, we like to share quotes that we liked with you listeners. Phoenix, I believe you have something for us today?
I do. I am not a writer. I've been fooling myself and other people. And that's by John Steinbeck. I studied him in my English class. He's got books everywhere.
Yeah.
Are we sending the right message here?
Everyone feels it.
Yeah. If Steinbeck can feel crushing doubt about what he does, then, it's okay. It's okay.
Google him. Google him. You'll feel better. Trust me.
Steenbeek.
All right.
What is that? Steambeak?
Steenbeek. Steenbeek.
Oh, Stein.
I'm just talking shit.
So, dear listeners, if you have enjoyed our podcast, please leave a review wherever you consume your podcast, whether it is Spotify, Apple Podcast, or whatever. And also, I'd like to remind you that the new Mythic, an anthology of sci-fi, fantasy, and horror, is available on Amazon. It is really good.
And contains 2 Aurealis Award-nominated writers.
Thank you for listening, guys. And remember, it's okay to have doubt. It's okay to feel insecure. Just don't let it stop you.
Amen.
You're listening to Prose and Cons, the Precipice Fiction podcast.